To know how many look dominant recessive. 1, 2, 3 look dominant recessive. Okay, well, how many look recessive dominant? Okay, well, I've got 1, 2, 3. And then last but not least, looking recessive recessive, I've got 1. And that 9, 3, 3, 1 adds up to 16. Right? So I've got a total of 16. And so that would be my dihybrid phenotypic ratio. Look dominant dominant, look dominant recessive, look recessive dominant, look recessive recessive. Okay, so let's walk through a couple of dihybrid word problem examples. So in this one here, I've got in flies, red eyes are dominant to brown eyes, and brown bodies are dominant to yellow. A fly with a genotype big R, big B, little b, so heterozygous for both, is mated with a fly that is homozygous recessive for both. What percent of the offspring will be genotype homozygous recessive for both? So remember, our first thing that we need to do is set up our cross. So I know I've got one parent that is big R, big B, little b, crossed with the other parent that's homozygous recessive for both. Okay, so when I set up my square, and I'm going to do this a little bit differently. Okay, so when I set up my square, the first thing I need to do, right, I need to group my like terms so I can FOIL, right? So my first, outside, inside, and last to get my gametes. And then when I go to do that for the second parent, you'll notice the only combination they can have is little r, little b. Right? There's no other combinations they can have. So there's no reason that I need to write this down 16 times. What I do need to do is I need to find a way to remember that this is going to happen 16 times. Okay, so when I'm filling in my box here, I just remind myself that this is going to be the same all the way down. So I'm going to see these same offspring chances all the way down. So my question now then was, what percent of the offspring are going to be little r, little b, little b? Right? Well, all these guys over here are. So out of 16, that's going to be 4 out of 16, which percent, because that's what it asked me for, is 25%. Okay, so let's look at one more. In birds, green feathers are dominant to yellow feathers, and long beaks are dominant to short beaks. A bird with a genotype, big G, little l, is mated with a bird that is big G, big L, little l. What percent of offspring will have green feathers and short beaks? Okay, so set up our cross. We've got our cross, right? I've got one parent and another parent. Okay, big G, big L, big G, little L, little l. I need my box. This box is probably going to be a little crowded. Okay, so let's FOIL here. First, outside, inside, and last. Same on the other one. And what you will notice, okay, is I'm going to have, since I only have little l to choose from, I'm going to have 2 possibilities of big G, little l, and 2 possibilities of little g, little l. And I'm going to actually group those together, so just like before, I can cut down on my writing that I'm doing in my box here. Okay, so when I'm filling in my box, okay, that'll be the same. So I can save myself a little bit of time here, because this can be kind of time intensive. And I know you do have a significant amount of time on your STAR test, but it is still a timed test. Okay, and like when you take a test in class, You know, you have the limited amount of time that you have in class to be able to accomplish it. So you need to, you know, where you can save time, go for it. As long as you don't mess it up. Now, if you need to write it all 16 times, write it all 16 times. I don't want you to forget that you need to count something because it's not actually written there. Okay, so now I want the percent of my offspring here that are going to have green feathers, okay, and short beaks. So to have green feathers are dominant, then they can be big G, or big G, little g. Either one of those genotypes gets me green feathers. Short beaks are recessive. So they have to be little l, to give me short beaks. So I'm looking for any combination of big G, little l, or big G, little l, little l. Okay? So I want to know my percent of my offspring. So let's answer our question here. Okay, so green feathers, short beaks. So no, no, yes. Yes, there's 2 of them. Yes, yes. And yes, yes. So that is 6 out of 16. And I don't have a calculator in front of me, so whatever 6 out of 16 is, that is my answer, right? 6 divided by 16, that would multiply by 100, and I get my percent for my answer. Okay, so for some of you, the big square is intimidating and it's freaked you out and you've already decided you're done with this. So let me show you another method. For some people, the big square is great. You like it. It's fine. It's no big deal. For other people, hey, not so much. So let me show you another method, and that way you guys can pick and choose which one you like the best. So let's go with our feather example here. Okay, so I've got green feathers, short beaks, okay, crossed with heterozygous for green feathers, long beaks, and long beaks are long beak was dominant to short beaks, green were dominant to yellow feathers. Same example we had just a second ago. Okay, so what I can do is I can do individual Punnett squares, individual smaller monohybrid Punnett squares for each of the traits. So in this case here, I'm talking about 2 traits. Okay, I'm talking about color and I'm talking about beak length. So I can do 1 Punnett square for beak length, just like I normally would. Split up my gametes, figure out my offspring here. Okay, same now, then I could do the same thing for beak size. I'm sorry, that was for, this side is for feather color. So over here I've got feather color. Over here I've got beak size. So I fill out my gametes again for beak size. Mom, Dad, fill in my square. And now I have probabilities for when feathers would happen, when I'd have certain feather colors, and when I would have a certain beak size. But if you think to math, your rules of probability, if I want 2 things to happen at the 2 individual events to happen at the same time, I need to multiply their possibility of happening. Okay, so let's say I wanted to know how many would be green, which is dominant, and long beaks. Okay, so that's my question. Green and long beaks. So I look over at my square on the left, and I determine my fraction for them being green. I've got 3 out of 4 are going to be green. And then I look at my square on the right, and I look at my fraction for long beaks. 3 out of 4. And I multiply those 2 together. Okay, and so when I multiply those 2 together, I get 9 out of 16. Okay, and if I needed a percentage, I could convert that to a percent. Okay, so you can take the 2 traits, do these smaller monohybrid squares for each trait, then take your probabilities and multiply the 2 together. Let's apply that to a couple of examples now. So let's look at this one here. I've got in mice, gray fur is dominant to white fur, and brown eyes are dominant to blue eyes. If a mouse with a genotype big G, big B, is crossed with a mouse that has a genotype big G, little b, what trait will appear in all of the offspring? Okay, so I have my cross here. There's one, there's another parent. Okay, so I set up my individual squares. Okay, so I've got big G, little g for the gametes from the first parent. Then I've got big G, little g for the gametes on the second. Okay, so when I complete my square, I end up with this. And then for my trait regarding eye color, I set up my square again. Okay, and now this time I've got big B as a gamete option, little b as a gamete option. So again, I complete my square. And this time, the question isn't asking a percentage or anything like that. It just wants to know what trait will appear in all of the offspring. So essentially, what trait do you have a 100% chance of getting? Okay, and in this instance, there is a 100% chance that these mice are going to have brown eyes. Okay, so that trait would show up in 100% of the population. Okay, let's look at another one. Okay, so in this one, I've got plants. The tall allele is dominant to the short allele, and purple flowers are dominant to white. What percentage of the offspring from the cross below will be short with white flowers? Okay, so we're looking at short with white flowers. So I'm talking about two traits here. So I'm going to draw my square first for height. Okay, so there's the gametes from one parent. There's the gamete from the other parent. I complete my square. Okay, and then I do that for my flower color. There's my gametes for each flower on the side. Fill in my square. I'm exaggerating. Since the two letters look the same, you really need to exaggerate which one is dominant, which one is recessive. So I'm looking here. My question was which one's percentage of the offspring will be short with white flowers. So short is recessive. So the only way they can look short is to have little t, little t. So that's 1 out of 4. Okay, and then white flowers are also recessive. So the only way they can look recessive is to be little p, little p. Same here to be short. They had to be little t, little t. So there's 2 of them there. So 2 out of 4. And then remember, I multiply them. Okay, so my percentage of the offspring, okay, I've got 2 out of 16. Okay, and again, I don't have the calculator in front of me. Convert that to the percent, right? 2/16. I divide 2 by 16, multiply by 100, and I get whatever my percent is there. Okay, but I can take those two traits and treat them individually. You just have to remember to multiply your probability of both of those things happening at the same time. Okay, so hopefully one of those two methods will work for you, and we'll be practicing these a lot in class over the next few days.